Hi, welcome to another episode of Hot Takes. Question: has the government lied to us? Answer: oh, most certainly. But in particular, has it lied to us about education and the VAT on private schools? And it seems that most definitely they've lied. Twice. There has been a report in the Telegraph which highlights two really important things, and it comes from memos that have been revealed while this VAT on a court case going through about VAT on pupils who are SEND, special educational needs. And if the parents win it, the government are actually in a very, very great deal of trouble. But it's come out that civil servants and experts alike, both groups, both these cohorts, told the government in memos that the date they were imposing it, the beginning of January, was the worst possible date to do it, and that they should wait until at least the end of the academic year, i.e. around June, say, and then bring it in from September 2025. And the government looked at this and ignored them deliberately. In order, it seems, the decision was made to actually maximise the amount of disruption they could within private schools, many of whom frontbenchers on the Labour Party went to these said private schools. So now that they've had the benefit of that, it's hoist the ladder up, I'm all right, Jack. That's the first one, and that is put down just out of spite. But the second one is a far bigger lie that absolutely needs to be answered, and actually I would suggest needs heads to roll. And that is that the government lied to the people in this country, outright looked them in the eye and told them a load of bollocks, lies, and they knew it was lies. Because the government said our estimates is going to be that 30 to 35,000 children would go across from the public school system to the state school system. That's what they said. And that was a lie. Outright lie. It's been revealed in this case that as part of the disclosure and all these documents coming out, and rather embarrassing for the government, that the government's own figures weren't 30 to 35,000. It was in excess of 54,000, nearly 20,000 more. And why is that significant? And why did they lie? Well, it's significant for a very good reason. At £54,000, the amount of money that they're not making on the VAT, because those children are not going into public school, now has to be made up elsewhere. Because they've done their figures on the estimates and they've published them on the estimates that 35,000 would come across, which means that there'd be that X number still in public school and they get the VAT for that. That's no longer the case. There's an extra 20,000 pupils whose fees aren't generating VAT. And, of course, there's an extra 20,000 or so pupils going into the state system that now have to be paid for. Now, previously, the parents had been paying tax for a state school space that they hadn't been using. And now that same tax is going to be used for a state school place that they are going to be using. Unfortunately, all across the country, they don't have an extra 20,000 spaces available. In fact, they didn't even have the original 35,000. There's just not enough spaces. Now, if you think about this, 35 or 55,000, let's call it 55,000 for the sake of keeping it nice and easy. 55,000, yeah? How many high schools is that? Put it bluntly. Or how many schools in total? 200 schools need to be built? How much is that going to cost? But before you even get into that argument, here's the thing. The amount of money that is going to be raised by the VAT is less than the amount of money the government are going to have to spend to educate those 55,000 pupils going into the state system. And so the taxpayer is actually being shortchanged. We're having to pay more money out of what can only be described really as sheer nastiness of this government, who hate the idea of ambition and achievement and people getting a better education. And it's even worse than that, because the amount of the amount of private schools that are now going to be filled, but the bill for the schooling will not be paid by the parents of the child, will be paid by the local educational authority, is going to skyrocket. You see, previously, if you had a child and they had special educational needs and you could afford it, you'd send them to the public school. Now, of course, you can't afford to pay that, and so they have to go into the state sector. However, for certain pupils, the state sector cannot offer the education that's required. And so at that point, the only option is that the state system pays to put that child back into the private school whence it's just come, and pay the full fee and the VAT, leaving the parents much better off because their child's still going to the same school, only they aren't paying the bill. And in fact, rough back of an envelope calculations, given how many children this will now apply to, currently, and I'll come to that in a minute, is it's going to cost the country about £2 billion. That's how much this policy is about to lose the country because of the sheer nastiness of this Labour Party that really do loathe aspiration, and the incredible stupidity and dimness of a woman who can't count sitting in number 11. You know, and this is a major, major problem. But it gets worse than that as well, because when these capital buildings have to be built to house these children, and then more teachers have to be hired, the cost for this is going to run into the tens or 20s of billions, initially for the capital build, then $1 billion a year on upkeep, and then wages and taxes and pensions, etc. And nobody knows how this is going to be paid for. Rachel Reeves hasn't got that, quote, fiscal headroom because she's fucked up the economy so badly, she can't fix it. All I'm going to say is this. Aren't you glad you're living in a country run by really nice people who really want this country to do well, who want people to go and learn, get educated, lead, become tomorrow's leaders with that fantastic education, and of course, to not overwhelm the state system, so that even those who can't afford to go to public school at least get a half-decent education in a school that's repaired and not oversubscribed. And we aren't being led by dim, stupid bints who lie on their CV, who can't count, who can't do basic calculations, and who screw everything up every time without fail. That'd be nice. Maybe in 4 years' time, eh? Thanks very much. Bye.